नमस्कार मित्रांनो. मागच्या वेळेला आपण आपला पहिला चॅप्टर सुरू केलेला आहे. त्यात कार्डिनल पॉइंट्स ऑफ एन ऑप्टिकल सिस्टीम हे डिस्कस केलं आणि त्यानंतर कार्डिनल पॉइंट्स किती, तर इन ऑल टोटल देर आर 6 cardinal points, means that 2 focal points, 2 principal points and 2 nodal points. त्यापैकी in last lecture we have discussed about the principal points and principal planes. Now today we will see about focal points and focal planes as well as nodal points and nodal planes. First of all, here we will see about focal points and focal planes. For that purpose, we will draw this diagram, which is nothing but the diagram which we have been discussed in last lecture. See, there are two lenses, L1 and L2, आणि OA आणि F1S हे दोन इन्सिडेंट रे आपण बघतो. या डायग्रामचं डिस्कशन आता आपण बघूया. जर पॅरलल बीम ट्रॅव्हलिंग फ्रॉम लेफ्ट, हा पॅरलल बीम हा लेफ्ट पासून ट्रॅव्हल होतोय लेफ्ट टू राईट इन ऑब्जेक्ट स्पेस. सी, इन ऑप्टिक्स one side is object space and this is the image space. This beam is incident on the optical system. The beam covers together at the point F2. इथून हा incident beam हा F2 ला emerge out होतो. On the other side, in image space, म्हणजे ऑब्जेक्ट स्पेस पासून सुरू झालेला इन्सिडेंट बीम हा इमर्ज होतो F2 ला इमेज स्पेस मध्ये. And therefore the point F2 here is called second focal point of the optical system. या second focal point विषयी. As well as what about the beam which is passing through the F1? हा F1 मधून पास होतो, इकडून येतोय तो या ऑब्जेक्ट स्पेस मधून आणि मग तो F1 मधून पास होतो ऑन द ॲक्सिस and it emerges through the optical system as shown in this diagram, and the point F1 here, this point is called as first focal point. Means that a beam of light passing through the point F1 on the axis of the object side is rendered parallel, हा इकडे parallel to the axis after emergence through the optical system as shown in this diagram, and by which this F1 point is called as first focal point. See, keeping in mind this geometry by this diagram, we have to define, we have to discuss what are the focal points. By definition, we can have the first focal point here. This is the first focal point. The first focal point is a point on the principal axis. This is a point on the principal axis of an optical system such that a beam of light passing through, and it is rendered parallel to the principal axis after refraction to the optical system. See, this beam of light passing through the F1, which is incident to the lens L1, and it emerges out and rendered, then it takes it having parallel to the principal axis after refraction to this lens is nothing but the focal point or a first focal point. Again, for the second focal point, we will see the second focal point on the principal axis of the optical system such that beam of light traveling parallel, beam of light traveling parallel to the principal axis of the optical system after refraction to the system passes through it. This is the second focal point. And what about the focal planes? See, our this article having a nomenclature that focal points and focal planes. As we have discussed the first focal point and second focal point, now we will see what about the focal planes. The planes here, the planes which are passing through the principal focal points F1 and F2. See here, the plane which is passing through the first principal focal points F1 and F2 perpendicular to this axis are called first focal plane and second focal plane respectively. Means that if we have been drawn the planes which are passing through the focal point F1 and focal point F2, at that time the formation of that planes is nothing but the first focal plane and second focal plane respectively. Then the rays starting from a point in the focal plane, rays starting from the focal point in the object space corresponds to a set of conjugate parallel rays in the image space. In this way. Similarly, a set of parallel rays in the object space, this is the object space, corresponds to a set of rays intersecting at a point in the focal plane in the image space. See now, what about the distance? Then the distance of the first focal point. See here, the distance of the first focal point. The distance of the first focal point from the first principal point is F1 P1. See in the diagram, the distance of first focal plane from the first principal point. This is the first principal point. We have been already discussed about the principal point and principal plane in last lecture. Therefore, here the distance between the first focal point to first principal plane is nothing but f1 p1 and is called as the first focal length f1. The focal length of this lens means the focal length of this lens we can describe in this way the distance between f1 and p1 means distance from first focal point f1 to first principal point p1 is nothing but it is equal to the first focal length f1 of the optical system. Keep in mind this term because this is one of the important term and important concept as per the optics. Now the distance of the second focal point. See, what about second focal point? The distance of the second focal point from the second principal point, this is F2 and this P2 is the second principal point. This much distance is called as the second focal length F2. This much distance is known as second focal length. See friends, this article may become for the short notes and therefore you have to study very seriously because this is the beginning of the optics, and if you have got the basic concepts of optics then you will be able very easily you will be able for discussing or for keeping in mind the another next concepts of optics. Now in that, as we have discussed the focal length f1 and f2, they are also known as the focal length in the object space and image space respectively. And when the medium is the same of that lens system, then the two sides of the optical systems is nothing but f1 equal to f2, means focal length for the first lens system is equal to the focal length of the another lens system. It is numerically this much quantity is equal. See friends, in last lecture we have discussed the principal points. Today we are discussed here two focal points. Now we will see about nodal points. See, when we have discussed two principal points in the same at the same time, we have discussed the principal planes also. Two principal point having two principal planes, two focal points having two focal planes. Now two nodal points, same thing, having two nodal planes, and in all total these are 6 in numbers. Two principal point, two focal point and two nodal point. These are the 6 points. In exam they can ask the question, describe the cardinal points in detail. Or if for MCQ they can ask the number of cardinal points are dash dash dash. Then you have to write there are 6 cardinal points. Now here we will see nodal points and nodal planes. For that system, again we will just see this diagram. See this diagram carefully. These are the rays which are incident, and here this P1 is the first principal plane, P2S2 is the second principal, and points P1 and P2, first principal point, second principal point, this first focal point, second focal point, and see this N1 and N2, these are the 2 nodal points. Now what is actually nodal points? The nodal points are the points on the principal axis. This is principal axis. The nodal points are the points on the principal axis of the optical system where light rays without a refraction intersects the optic axis. Here the light ray which is incident, and here it is not get refracted directly, it is intersecting here at the point N1, and here again it is intersecting at point N2. In a thin lens, the nodal point is the center of the lens. See, if the lens system is a thin one, at that time the nodal points are the center of the lens. But when this case occurs, the case occurs only when if the lens system is thin one. Then light passing through the center of thin lens does not deviate. When the light passing through the thin lens system, then the rays are not deviating. In an optical system, the center separates into 2 nodal points. These are the 2 nodal points N1 and N2. The planes now passing through the nodal points and perpendicular to the principal axis. Let's see now, if the plane passing through this N1 and passing through the N2, the planes passing through the nodal points N1 and N2, in which that the planes are perpendicular to the principal axis are called the nodal points. Nodal planes. The plane passing through this N1 and which is perpendicular to this principal axis is called as first nodal plane, and the plane passing through the N2 which is perpendicular to this principal axis is known as second nodal point. At the same time, principal planes are planes. This once again we are discussing about the principal planes. What he is saying? He is saying that the principal planes are planes where all refraction are assumed to occur. All refractions occurs at principal planes. means principal plane P1 and principal plane P2. The nodal planes are planes where refraction does not take place. Keep in mind, this question may be asked by the examiner for MCQ. Nodal planes are the planes where refraction does not occur, does not take place. This figure represents an optical system with the help of its cardinal planes. This figure is important one because all the concepts for the cardinal points are explained beautifully in this diagram, ray diagram. We can see from this figure that a ray of light AN1, this AN1, directed towards one of the nodal point N1 after refraction through the optical system along N1 along N1 M2 and emerges out from the second nodal point N2 in a direction N2R here parallel to the incident ray. See, one thing is important here, the distances of the, see here, the distances of the nodal points are measured from the focal points. From this focal point, the distance for the nodal points can be measured. Here is the same, F2, N2, and here F1, N1. These are the distances. Friends, today here we have been completed the nodal points and nodal planes as well as focal points and focal planes. Therefore, in our total, once again we will revise the things about the cardinal points. The cardinal points of an optical system, there are 6 cardinal points, 2 focal point, 2 principal point and 2 nodal points. The planes passing through these points are the planes which are passing through the focal points are focal planes. The plane passing through the principal points are the principal planes, and the planes passing through the nodal points are known as nodal planes. And why these cardinal points are means came forward to avoid the tedious calculations, it having a more importance of cardinal points, and therefore the scientist Gauss put forward a theory of the cardinal points. When there is a system of thin lenses, then it is not necessary to we can avoid, and in that case the thickness of the lenses because that are the thin. But if there is a thick lenses, then in calculations we cannot avoid the thickness of the lens, and therefore what to do in taking consideration about the thickness and to do the calculations, that is a much tedious job, and therefore to avoid this the Gauss discussed these cardinal points, and which having a very much more importance in the optics, because by these cardinal points which from object space they are starting the incident beam, and we get at an image space its image finally, and by which we can have the another optical instruments to situate the cardinal points at a proper side, then we will get the proper answer. Such as in a telescope, in a traveling microscope, in spectrometer, etc. In these instruments, we have to use the concept of cardinal points, and therefore these are the important points. Therefore, go very systematically, uh, observe the ray diagrams carefully, which are drawn at every article. Try to draw yourself at your uh, in your notebook or a plain paper by taking pencil and rubber help of these things, because in optics pencil, rubber, scale, these having much more importance. Don't draw roughly, draw smoothly and neatly. It will mm, improve your skill to draw the diagrams of optics, because ray diagram having much more importance. Then thank you very much. In next lecture we will see the next topic. Thank you.